is the mechanism that is causing it really is a naturally created hexagon shape in at the northern pole of Saturn? Mm-hmm. Do we understand? Is it? I guess physicists talk about angular momentum. Is it a function of the spin of Saturn or the bulk, the size of it that is causing these particles, in effect, to be? I guess you're calling it a cyclotron.
Synchrotron.
Synchrotron.
Yeah, just like the Large Hadron Collider's main ring, we're looking at a main ring on the northern pole of Saturn. The way that physicists typically try to describe the natural arrangement into a hexagon is they talk about the eddy currents, the backspin, if you will, of the movement of what they call clouds, but these are actually particles, charged particles that are accelerated and causing these eddy currents like you would find along the edges of the banks of a river. Now that's very plausible, but let me underscore this with my model of the universe, mm-hmm. in that the universe is actually composed of tetrahedrons, and this is definitively shown both at the quantum scale and also at the cosmological scale, that the universe is arranged in tetrahedrons. These are four-sided pyramids with the base being a triangle rather than a square like you'd find in Egypt. So with that said, tetrahedrons naturally form a sphere, and that's why the planet, and virtually every planet that we observe, including our own, sorry, flat earthers, but that's why, yeah, I had to zing that in there. That's why you see these tetrahedrons, because the planet is a sphere naturally composed of tetrahedrons, and at the northern pole, they exhibit themselves that because of this synchrotron effect, this particle accelerator effect. Now, I had a conversation with Richard Hoagland a few months ago, and Richard Hoagland and I were on the air, and I said, Richard, we were talking about, because he spent a lot of time talking about the northern pole of Saturn, mm-hmm. I described what I just said to you in the audience, and he had not heard this before, that I was describing it as a synchrotron particle accelerator in Birkeland currents. Mm-hmm. And he and I agreed that the eddy currents are responsible for the hexagonal shape. But I said to him, as a side note, I said, if you have the proper instruments on a satellite over the northern pole of our own sun, you would see exactly the same hexagon and synchrotron energy effects going on at the sun. And he was stunned. He said to me, how do you know that? And I said, it's simple. It's the geometry of the universe. And it's the plasma. This mm-hmm. is where we're getting into the next part of this. It's the plasma that surrounds everything in the universe. The universe is not a vacuum. It is filled with ionized gas. It is a conductive medium. And planets and stars are formed by the gathering of this plasma, the condensation, the coalescing of this plasma, forming planets and stars. Mm. And he said, well, let me tell you something. What you just revealed is something that very few people are supposed to know.
Most interesting. Wow, that's pretty impressive. Yeah, and
now that was recorded on his show. That's in his archives.
Oh, well, I wish he would make his shows public so we could all listen and participate.
Oh, my goodness. That was not an easy interview to listen to. Not just because he took a crack at flat Earth, which I actually seem to be hearing more often, just in general lately, but I suppose that's probably a good sign overall, because it means we're pressing forward, but just wow. This was really an eye-opening and, somewhat perspective-providing thing for me to stop and listen to. I was actually working on like 3 different little projects this week and kind of getting back into research mode, and I just wandered across this in the suggested video sidebar, and yeah, it's just so crazy to me, especially because the first couple videos on my channel were actually these little compilations made from Anthony Patch interview, who I'd started listening to in that year before encountering Flat Earth, and oddly enough, Patch's CERN material played somewhat of a role in how I started thinking about alternative cosmology. And once I started really turning that corner, Patch was actually the first place that I heard about things like electric universe theory and, the whole concept of plasma physics and stuff. And really what he's describing in that clip, the concept of the ether, which of course was around for a long time before relativity stepped in, and yet, not surprisingly, Patch seems quite unwilling to use that term. Honestly, I pretty much had to stop listening to the interview at that point. That little clip is about 45 minutes into the 90-minute presentation, and like I said, it's just painful to listen to now. I mean, kind of embarrassing to hear him going on like this, just spouting so much scientific jargon, not just in terms of heliocentrism, but of course all the ridiculous quantum pseudoscience that he's just unloading, and stuff that would even be pseudoscience from the perspective of the mainstream quantum physicists who he's quoting out of the left side of his mouth and then indiscriminately contradicting with his right. And honestly, I'm just blown away by what I'm hearing with so much of what he's saying and preaching, because it's really astounding to hear him in that very clip talking about how planets and stars are formed by coalescing cosmic gases. That of course is a fundamental element of cosmic evolution, and it's absolutely contrary to biblical creationism. And yet, sitting there listening to him is Doug Woodward, nodding and humming in agreement and going, "Wow, that's really interesting." It's like basic biblical discernment has just left the building. Here we have a supposedly Christian researcher totally regurgitating evolutionary theory, and he actually did a couple other times in that period before this clip as well, and nobody even blinks, because they're so bedazzled by all this really impressive sounding information about quarks and subatomic collisions and Birkeland currents and quantum computing and dimensional gateways and blah blah blah, that it's like their discernment just gets switched off because, they think they're getting super deep into exposing the dangers of CERN. But here's the thing. I would at times really wrestle with questions like how much flat Earth research and all the cosmological issues that are connected to it, ultimately mattered all that much if other Christians who were still rejecting flat Earth still understood things like that evolution was a lie, and still understood that the whole UFO phenomenon was demonic, and that there was the possibility of the alien invasion and so on. I mean, aren't those two of the big deceptions that are tied to the fake heliocentric universe anyways? So, isn't it somewhat irrelevant to keep pressing the issue, as many people, have argued to me? Well, you look at this example of Anthony Patch and his CERN research dealing with quantum computing and gateways to Saturn, and now, of course, he's merging the whole Mandela effect narrative as well. And come on, we're absolutely able to see that there are some very real and troubling possibilities for both Christians and just people in general to listen to these kinds of approaches to CERN and Bible prophecy. And okay, even if they claim to reject evolution on a doctrinal level, and they're hip to the whole fake alien agenda thing, and understand Genesis 6 and whatever else, then you just start swallowing all of this quantum dogma, this quantum alchemical quasi-mysticism as being true, or at least mostly true, with the idea that you're going to use that information to expose the true sinister occult agenda behind CERN. That's nonsense. That's just a different pitfall to get swallowed up by. And when you step back now and look at how Anthony Patch has been so embraced by folks like Doug Woodward and Gans Shimura and really everyone in the whole Skywatch TV circle, is it really any wonder that all those folks are linking arms to, to make jokes about flat Earth and basically taking the exact same stance as, guys like Neil deGrasse Tyson and every other secular scientist out there towards flat Earth? Because they've apparently put their money on this, quote, CERN research, that they clearly believe that this is going to sell lots of books and documentaries and so on. I mean, they're clearly tickled to hear Patch talk about being on with Hoagland and operating in that kind of a circle and dropping little teasers like Hoagland saying, how do you know this? You're not supposed to know this. I mean, come on. That's like textbook coast-to-coast wannabe whistleblower antics. That should honestly be a huge red flag to anybody who's been in this arena for very long. It's sensationalist garbage. It's just embarrassing. But unfortunately, this is where we really seem to see a true line in the sand being drawn now, because while so many of these Bible prophecy / fringe topic researcher people, they'll entertain just about any fantastic theory out there, whether it be on Hollow Earth or Nibiru or whatever else, but flat Earth, or even just the narrower investigation of space fakery and NASA, is totally off limits, because it would mean a complete divorce from any hopes of being able to share the stage with guys like Hoagland. And it would mean a complete breakdown of their entire business model, really. I mean, sorry, Skywatch TV. They're a nonprofit entity, and it's still an incorporated body with a budget and an awareness of their bottom line and their support base and all that. I'm just saying. But this line being drawn does seem to continually come back to the quantum issue. You know, the alleged physics of the cosmos, which is increasingly being turned to by Christian prophecy researchers such as Josh Peck, and of course the distinguished Chuck Missler, as being this incredible evidence of the validity of the Bible, while they completely ignore the ancient occult roots of atomism and quantum theory, and also all the current day connections being made by guys like Michio Kaku and so many others between quantum mechanics and things like the Kabbalah. But no, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to take an honest look into it. And they don't want to even stop and question themselves to ask if perhaps they are inadvertently ingesting a rather elaborate occult psyop, if you want to bring out that term, of what is ultimately all about pushing the concepts of simulation theory. Last thing I watched from Chuck Missler was when he was taking his turn laughing at Flat Earth, and he jokingly said that the Earth isn't flat, but the universe is flat. Well, right there, what he's doing is actually admitting that he's swallowed simulation theory because of how much credence he's allowed himself to give to the realm of quantum theory and theoretical physics. The whole flat universe idea that's just really another way of describing simulation theory. You know, that whole realm of science comes straight out of the occult, and I have absolutely no doubt at this point. And so, you know, great, you believe in things like the Nephilim, you believe in the UFO deception, but then you still entertain ideas like the secret space program and embrace this whole paradigm presented by Anthony Patch now, which basically claims that a demonic army is being imprisoned within the planet of Saturn, and that CERN is like this portal that will allow them to burst forth onto the planet Earth at some point. And the crazy thing is that by doing so, you've just allowed the possibility for the whole alien invasion meme to simply take on a slightly new form, right? Involving quantum computers and Birkeland currents rather than flying saucers and little green men. I mean, does it really matter that you're labeling them as demons if the mainstream Hollywood propaganda is already pushing the same concept all over the place, with hordes of monstrous aliens pouring through a portal in the sky? Now, I'm not calling Anthony Patch a shill or anything, so please don't misunderstand me there, but listening to this recent interview was honestly disturbing to hear just how off track we can get when we fall into that familiar trap of thinking that we need to learn and accept all the intricacies of modern scientific theory in order to expose a certain satanic lie, rather than asking the Bible first and being willing to let it say how much of it is actually true or false. It's really the same trap now that we see that creationism fell into decades ago, whereby they turned to things like evolution-based astronomy, driven by Freemasonic NASA, in order to try and disprove evolution. How does that make sense? In the end, you're still not putting the wisdom of God above the so-called wisdom of fallen man. And you're still polluting the well, polluting the word, allowing lies to mingle with the truth, where eventually a tiny bit of yeast, even a quantum-sized bit of yeast, will work through the whole dough.
Currents like you would find along the edges of the banks of a river. Now that's very plausible, but let me underscore this with my model of the universe, in that the universe is actually composed of tetrahedrons, and this is definitively shown both at the quantum scale and also at the cosmological scale, that the universe is arranged in tetrahedrons. These are four-sided pyramids with the base being a triangle rather than a square like you'd find in Egypt.
What is the mechanism that is causing the, it really is a naturally created hexagon shape at the northern pole of Saturn? Mm-hmm. Do we understand, is it, I guess physicists talk about angular momentum. Is it a function of the spin of Saturn or the bulk, the size of it that is causing these particles, in effect, to be, I guess you're calling it a cyclotron?
Synchrotron.
Synchrotron,
yeah, just like the Large Hadron Collider's main ring, we're looking at a main ring on the northern pole of Saturn. The way that physicists typically try to describe the natural arrangement into a hexagon is they talk about the eddy currents, the backspin, if you will, of the movement of what they call clouds, but these are actually particles, charged particles that are accelerated and causing